It's 1974, Chapel Hill. It's the first day of school, and the school bus comes down our street, and it stops at every house and picks up every child except our house, and except our son, Jay Turnbull, who was left behind. Jay was sitting on the front porch watching the taillights of the school bus leaving the neighborhood, singing with everything he had, "I'm a Tar Heel born, I'm a Tar Heel bred," claiming that he belonged, and being muted by his intellectual disability and autism, that people in the school district really did believe that less able meant less worthy, because there was no school for him. 1974, it was not that long ago. Well, my husband, Rudd, and I went to see the school superintendent, and we said, it's immoral to consider a child not worthy of being educated in this school district. And we absolutely insist that Jay have an opportunity for an education. And he quickly told us that he and the Chapel Hill system was not required to serve children with severe disabilities, and that they were not part of the school system. But he said, maybe I'll make an exception. He said, if the two of you will write a grant to get money for a teacher and a teacher aide, and if you will look around and find 2 qualified people to take those positions, if you get the grant, and if you will locate 6 or 8 children with needs similar to Jay's in Chapel Hill, because we don't know about those kids, then he said, I will ask a custodian here in Lincoln Center, which is the administration building in Chapel Hill, still there. I will ask a custodian to clean out a storage room, and I will allow for the teacher and the teacher aide that you fund and find, and for the children that you find, to have class in the storage room. And he wanted us to be grateful. But Rudd and I did those things. We got the money, found the teachers, found the children, and Jay started his education in 1975 in a storage room, sequestered from the other children in the neighborhood and the other elementary age children in Chapel Hill, because only adults worked in that building. Well, fast forward, Rudd and I moved to Lawrence, Kansas, and just as Jay was a teenager. And as we got to Lawrence, we were fortunate to move to a neighborhood where there were lots of parties, and Jay loved being the social person, loved being at parties, and loved extending hospitality to people. So he adored his father, emulated his father in almost every way, and he would put on his blazer and his silk tie, and when we had parties at our house, he would be greeting people at the door, and when he would get a little overdone with the excitement of the evening, he would say, "Hi, I'm Jay Turnbull, and this is my wife, Ann." And what was I supposed to say? I'm his mother, not his wife. It was always surprising to people who came for the first time and heard that. But not nearly as surprising as a party at our neighbor's house when they had a guest in, and Jay was proud to be invited, and he wanted to be on his best behavior, and he was walking up to this gentleman, shaking his hand and saying, "Don't touch your penis in public." Well, I was mortified. And I glared at him with that mother glare, and I said, "Jay, don't talk about that in public." And so Jay said, "Okay." And he kind of got the attention of everyone, and he said, "Don't talk about not touching your penis in public." Well, everyone at the party was blown away by how comfortable Jay was in his own skin and how he embraced his self to be truly who he was. Well, he progressed through the years of school, and when students with very significant disabilities finish high school, they typically don't have a chance to work in typical jobs, even though they're capable of doing that. But they often go to what's called a sheltered workshop. And the sheltered workshop is a place only for people with significant disabilities, kind of out of sight, out of mind, where the jobs are mostly very repetitive, menial. Jay said he wanted to wear a coat and tie. He was like Jackson, that we heard about earlier, who loved his tie. Jay wanted to wear a coat and tie, but nobody at the workshop wore coats and ties. Rudd and I were working really hard to get the workshop to stop congregating people to the side and to have them enable Jay to have a typical job, but they felt that was totally unrealistic. Jay was very distraught. He knew there was no dignity at the sheltered workshop. And so he decided that we weren't moving fast enough changing things for him, and he would do his own thing, which was to engage in some very aggressive behavior toward one other person in the workshop. I don't know why he picked that person. After I tell you a little more, you'll understand why I think maybe it was karma, why he picked this person. But he would get in so much trouble when he hit this person and choked this person. Understandably, those were awful behaviors, that they would put him in what they called a timeout booth, which was really a small little closet with a lock on the outside, where he was in there. You might call it solitary confinement for increasing amounts of time, on and on and on, to try to teach him to not do this. Well, the person that he hit and choked was the son of a state legislator. That's why I kind of think it was karma, because that person had the authority and accountability and standing to get Jay expelled very soon. And so here Jay was, 21 years old, expelled from the only adult program in our community. And Rudd and I were again in that position like we had been in when Jay started school. It was really up to us to figure out his adulthood. Well, we had the help of a lot of friends, a lot of professionals, many, many reliable allies who pulled together with us and created the supports for Jay to have a job at the University of Kansas as a clerical aide. He got his 20-year pin. He had very important jobs such as copying and collating and doing the mail run and shredding. He was paid more than minimum wage, about 12 times as much an hour as at the sheltered workshop, where the national average was 66 cents an hour. So Jay had his own home. It wasn't a group home where there were 6 or 8 or 10 people with disabilities living, but it was a real home just a couple of blocks from the university. You can't get expelled from your own home. Jay controlled the front door. He lived with housemates who provided him with a lot of support because he didn't tell time and he didn't cook and he didn't cross the street safely and he didn't count money. So he needed a lot of support for community living, and he got that from his housemates. Now, I have always been proud of the fact until tonight that Jay was taken into a fraternity at the University of Kansas. But when I heard Lee talk about drinking pee, I tell you what, Jay knew a hell of a lot better than to drink pee. He may have been disabled, but he never would have done that. Jay was taken into the SAE fraternity. It was amazing. We learned that what you get kicked out of programs for people with disabilities, they do at fraternities every Saturday night. A little hitting and a little choking. Jay raised the level of appropriate behavior at that SAE fraternity. He was the only one who did not touch his penis in public at the SAE fraternity. He worked hard to teach his fraternity brothers, but they had a learning difference when it came to learning to stop that behavior. Jay learned the SAE handshake. Now I could give, if any SAEs here tonight, come up and we'll do the handshake afterwards. Everybody in Lawrence, Kansas learned the handshake from Jay. On his Meals on Wheels run that he would do 3 days a week, he handed out that meal and he handed out an SAE handshake. And they all looked forward to his coming. And through all of this, Jay would stand proud with his shoulders back and his chest out, and he would reach back. It was almost like a yoga move. He would reach back so far, and he would say, "I'm a man. I'm not a boy." He was so proud of himself and so comfortable with who he was in the world. Well, let's move to Tuesday evening, January 6, 2009. Jay was jamming with one of his musician friends. Music was his favorite activity, favorite hobby. And he had a friend who would come over weekly at least and bring her guitar, and they would sing and have a wonderful time. And she told us that night it was just so strange because they would always do all of these different songs, a lot of Broadway hits, a lot of Beatles and John Denver and Simon and Garfunkel, the great musicians of the world. But that night he just wanted to sing the spiritual Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. And he just kept singing. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home, a band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. 10 hours later, the chariots came. Totally out of the blue. We, his family, did not see one sign that this was happening in our world. His housemates, his co-workers, his fraternity brothers, nobody saw a single sign. Could it be that a man, not a boy, with an IQ below 40 had even been able to have a premonition about his own death? Why was it the night before that he could not stop singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot? As Jay took his last breath, painlessly, instantly, silently, his spirit was freed to the universe. It was freed to the skies and to the butterflies. It was freed to this room. I mean, I really believe his spirit is in this room with us tonight. At the memorial service for Jay, over 800 people, standing room only, packed our church in Lawrence. People came from far and wide, fraternity brothers, co-workers, people who had moved away from the University of Kansas, coming back. When we looked in that sanctuary, it was filled with people of different races, of different income strata, of different genders, of different sexual orientations, of different abilities and differences and disabilities. And it was as if everyone was really encircling Jay, and how they celebrated with affection and respect the way that he lived his life and the way that he embraced his own dignity and lived with courage to be himself every day. We were absolutely awed when we were told by the University of Kansas Endowment Association that they received more contributions in his memory than for anyone in whose name money had ever been given to the Endowment Association in the 126 years they had been in operation. Isn't that amazing? That a young boy who the school bus didn't pick up, who wasn't worthy to go to school in 1974, wasn't perceived to be worthy, he was worthy, who started school in a storage room, who started employment in a sheltered workshop, and within that workshop was in the timeout booth, the solitary confinement booth for most of the time. Isn't it amazing that he became the ambassador of Lawrence, Kansas? As we honor Jay's courage this evening, I hope that we can all take this amazing lesson from him and gain our own courage to be ourselves with all of the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of who we are, to be our best selves, to truly embrace our inherent dignity. To paraphrase a familiar verse, society drew a circle and shut Jay out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But courage and Jay had the wit to win. Jay drew a circle and drew you all in. Thank you.
And Turnbull.